I've called for military reform. We have to get them all out, all of them, all of them. They all have to go. If not to jail, then at least to a well-deserved obscurity, without pensions, I might add.
I think jail is a much too liberal option.
In light of what happened on October 7th, in light of everything that's happened subsequently to October 7th, or not happened, more to the point, history would actually absolve us by putting them up against a brick wall or a hangman's noose, which would be more appropriate. I wouldn't dignify them with a firing squad. I just hang them for what they did to this country on October 7th.
Which of course did not happen in a day. It was a process that began in the Israeli deep state, if you want to know the truth, going back to the 1960s in the wake of the Six-Day War. We're talking about a multi-generational effort, a concerted and well thought out effort, a march through the institutions, a takeover of all government apparatus, all foci of power.
Locales, especially the universities.
There is nothing more real in this world, as any intelligent person today must realize, than that concept that in the past many people have poo-pooed, but any reasonable person must understand and admit is very, very real, and I refer to the concept of the deep state.
Correct.
The Israeli deep state is very real, it's palpable. And everything that has happened to our holy and precious homeland and people over a period of decades is the result of the machinations of these people. So take for example the Camp David Accords, which where it was agreed that Israel would hand over the entire Sinai, the entire Sinai Peninsula, to the Egyptians. It's not actually theirs by international law either, by the way, but that's another discussion. It certainly was not always part of Egypt. The British, by the way, for those who may recall, around the time of the First World War, I don't remember the exact date. The Sinai Peninsula was
Ottoman
under Ottoman rule, and at some point the British decided that did not suit them, and they placed one battleship in the Mediterranean opposite Gaza and another in the Red Sea, and they simply announced to the Ottomans that henceforth the border between Egypt, which was then in British hands, and your territory is the line that is drawn hypothetically between these two battleships. And that is how the Sinai became part of Egypt. Not exactly the most legitimate way of appropriating a territory, shall we say.
No, but it was critical for the defense of Suez. The British were never going to run that risk again.
I'm not denying that, but that doesn't,
the way they did it,
that doesn't make it an organic and legitimate part of Egypt. That was a requirement of the for the war effort and other activities and British interests at that time. I understand that, and it maybe was even legitimate at that time, but that doesn't make it part of Egypt.
No,
for all time.
Correct.
But putting that aside, the Camp David Accords were the result of the Israeli left's complete despair and terror that Israel could not survive in the wake of the Yom Kippur War, where they felt the country had almost been overrun, which for a couple of days was almost true, and it was a definite possibility, and it scared them, and they decided the only thing that we can possibly do is to cut some kind of a deal with the Ishmaeli and
that was followed up by Oslo.
I'm getting to that. Give them anything they demand and wish, and hope that they will allow us to remain in our pavement cafes along the Mediterranean coast.
I call that the concrete Israel.
Yeah,
the Gush Dan.
And therefore the Yom Kippur War led to Oslo. It was a process. It took time. It was 20 years from one to the other, 73 to 93, according
with a
to
lot of propaganda in between.
But I know I have heard from people who discussed these matters already in the late 70s and early 80s with people in Tel Aviv University, shall we say. I'm talking about specific conversations of which I was informed, where certain people said these already at that time, that we have to give everything away. We have to fold completely, and maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to survive. You know, in
we're doing the same now.
Of course,
we're doing the same now.
So that led to Oslo, and that led to fleeing from Lebanon.
Correct.
And we know how that worked.
The Idnat Hut.
So that was Ehud Barak's contribution. That was in 2000, according to the Gregorian calendar, as I recall. And then there was Ariel Sharon. It's all part of the same linear process and progression. And then that was in 2000 from Lebanon. That led to the 2005 fleeing from Gaza. We all know how all of these moves, all of these decisions, the decision of the Camp David process was agreed to and ensconced in Israeli political reality by Menachem Begin. In my humble opinion, one of the very worst prime ministers we ever had.
And let's not forget Yamit.
Of course, haven't forgot for a moment. Then Ehud Barak, who is well, until we had Yair Lapid, he would have been worthy of the title the worst prime minister. But then we had Yair Lapid for a short time, for a few months. So he stole that position from Ehud Barak, and of course Ariel Sharon, who was an unprincipled and violent man, it should be said. He was also, it's true, he was a great military tactician. That's also true. And he did a number of many great things for the Jewish people at one time in his career. But then he placed us in such a jeopardy down to the present day that he cannot possibly be forgiven for what he did to us. And all of that is a linear progression up to the present time.